Okay, let us see. Right, so I think we're live now, and we're just about ready to go. We've just going to start with our usual Tuesday talk, and as usual, we have a section from the Wisdom of the Zen Masters. Um, as usual, by Irmgard Schlegel. And today we're going to hear about Master Obaku. And Master Obaku was one of the great Chinese Chan masters from the Tang Dynasty. Good morning, Stephen Roberta. Good morning, Dees. Um, so he's perhaps best known to us as being the teacher of Master Rinzai, Lin Chi. But he was one of four great masters, really, who, starting with Baso Doitsu, who had a pupil called Hyakujo, and Hyakujo's pupil was Obaku, and Obaku's pupil was Rinzai, who founded the Rinzai school of Buddhism, of which I'm a member. Good morning, Joyce. Good from Corby. Good morning, David. Welcome. Um, Actually, I did realise that I hadn't put out the usual shout out on Facebook, so I hope I'm glad you all remembered about it. So welcome. Hello, Maggie. Hi from the Highlands. Right, so we will look at our passage for today from Master Robaku. So Master Robaku, who was often seen bowing with great devotion, was asked by a disciple, "Are you seeking something of the Buddha, or seeking something concerned with the truth?" The master replied, "I have nothing to ask of the Buddha, or to seek about the truth." "Why then do you worship?" The master said, "I simply worship." So, as I say, Obaku was a pupil of Master Hyakujo, who himself was a pupil of Baso Doitsu. And Baso Doitsu he came to his enlightenment, to his awakening, through hearing the words, "The ordinary heart is Buddha," or "This very heart is Buddha." And when we talk about the heart, it might just be useful to have a diversion, and because we use this term a lot, and just ask what it is that we're talking about. I use the word heart often in English translations. You'll see the term mind written in capital letters, and this is how the original Sanskrit word that I'm translating as heart, was originally used. The original Sanskrit word is chitta, Citta, and there isn't an exact translation for it into English. It does mean mind, but the problem is that in the West, mind has a rational or thinking connotation. One thinks with one's mind. Whereas chitta also has the warmth of the heart as well. It has the emotionality, the whole of the emotional household. And so mind isn't really enough. And I have noticed in more recent translations that many people are now switching to use the term heart, or some people use mind heart, or something like that. And basically, what is chitta? What is this Sanskrit word? It's the place, if you like, using that term loosely, it's the place where we are experiencing everything right now. So, sitting here speaking, sitting here listening, hearing sounds, feeling sensations through the body, perhaps your feet on the floor or you're behind on the seat, perhaps looking up and seeing a cloudy sky or seeing a rose. Um, all these things are being experienced somewhere. It's the place where the experience is actually happening. And this is chitta. But of course, all these things I've been talking about are in the physical realm, physical sensations, sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and so forth. But there's also the inner world, the world of mental formations or mental objects as they're referred to in Buddhism. This is thoughts, this is our memories, this is when we decide to do something, make a choice, when we, what's called volitions, willed actions. Also our emotionality as well. If you just stop and just take a moment to feel inwardly, um, what is your current mood right now? What is the current state really? My own is that obviously I feel somewhat concentrated giving this talk, but I'm also aware that in the background of my mind, I've got quite a busy day ahead of me, and so there's stuff rumbling there, thinking, oh, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. So there's a little bit of sort of not impatience exactly, but perhaps a little bit of underlying concern about making sure that everything gets done today. So that's the mood that's going on in my heart at the moment. So you could ask yourself the same thing. What exactly are you feeling? What is this sort of atmospheric mood that you're experiencing right now? And so these are all mental objects. That mood, the thoughts that are associated with it, these are all mental objects. So we have the physical objects in the physical world, and we have the mental objects in the mental landscape, in the inner geography, as I like to call it. And all of this, all these realms, these two realms together, the whole psychophysical organism, are happening in chitta. And this is what's being translated as mind with a capital M and also with heart with an H. Now, the important thing to remember, and this is the thing again, when we use words in English, they have a certain connotation. And so when we use the term mind, we tend to think of the brain, don't we? We tend to think, oh, well, it's all happening, in the brain. But obviously, if we are experiencing the world outwardly, then the term mind in Indian Chinese thought actually takes in the physical world. Mind actually is something that extends throughout the whole of the experiential universe, whether inwardly or whether outwardly. This is pure phenomenology here. And so this is what this place where this experience right here, right now is happening. This is chitta, and this is what Master Obaku said when heart is Buddha. He means this is Buddha. And what he's referring to is a Mahayana teaching from the Yogacara school, which had at its basis this idea that there is one mind or one substrate that underlies all phenomena, whether physical or mental, out of which it arises, all beings arise. And so Obaku himself was fond of teaching that all Buddhas and all beings arise from the one mind. That's what he used to say. And he got this from, as I say, from his teacher's teacher, well, from his teacher who got it from his teacher, who was Master Baso. And this is why Master Baso came to awakening through that phrase, the ordinary heart is Buddha. This heart is Buddha. This heart that of continuous transformations, because all the phenomena, both outwardly and inwardly, are continuously transforming. And he was famous for this. So Baso used to teach this all the time. In all his sermons, they would say, the heart is Buddha. And the problem is that he recognized that after a while, people began, they stopped really listening because he kept giving the same message. And although Baso brought many people to awakening through that phrase himself, most of his audience just sort of stopped listening. So one day he sort of took to the high chair to give his Teisho, which is the talk that a Zen master gives just before the noonday meal. And everybody was expecting to hear heart is Buddha. And instead he taught neither heart nor Buddha. And of course, everybody sort of sat back and said, what? Neither heart nor Buddha. But that's not what you taught yesterday or the day before. Neither heart nor Buddha. This is the teaching. And so that rattled everybody's cages. And it caused them to pay more attention, which was entirely the whole point of doing it. And along with that, one of Baso's pupils who he had brought to awakening through Heart is Buddha was a monk called Great Plum, who had left and founded his own monastery with his own disciples. And so Baso wasn't quite sure about Great Plum, whether he was properly settled. So he decided to send his head monk, and he said, look, as you know, I've changed my teaching. I want you to go and listen to Great Plum's teaching, and when he finishes, I want you to stand up and say, oh, but don't you know Baso has changed his teaching? Shouldn't you change also, being his disciple? And so he said, okay, so off he went. And sure enough, Great Plum gave his sermon, and at the end of it, after he had taught this heart is Buddha, the head monk stood up and said, "Oh, but don't you know, Baso is now no longer teaching heart is Buddha. He teaches neither heart nor Buddha. Shouldn't you be changing your teaching to conform with that?" And Great Plum said, "That old rascal can try to lead others astray any which way he likes. But for me, I came to my own awakening through Heart is Buddha, and that is what I teach." And the head monk went back to Baso and told him what had happened. And Master Baso nodded and smiled and said, "The Great Plum is ripe." So there we go. It's a nice little story. So here we have Master Obaku, who was going to. There he goes. He's seen bowing with great devotion, probably in the shrine room, and presumably a monk asks him, "Are you seeking something of the Buddha or seeking something concerned with truth?" And this really comes to the heart of devotion, doesn't it? Because, devotional practices are something very much at the center of all religions. We go, if a Christian goes to a church and prays to God and might ask God for something, or prays to a saint and might ask the saint for something. And it's the same with, it's the same with in Buddhism too. People pray to the Buddha and ask the Buddha for things, or they pray to the Bodhisattvas and ask for things. So Manjushri is the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and if you have an exam and you need to pass it, you need wisdom. So you ask Manjushri, "Please make me wise, for my exam, so I can pass my exam." And you go to the temple and light some incense and pray to him, and that sort of thing. Or to Guan Yin for compassion if you need some healing or something like that, or maybe you've had a falling out with a good friend and you're sad or whatever. So yeah, this is done the world over. This is sort of classic petitionary prayer. And so the monk was asking Baso about this. Are you asking the Buddha for something, or are you seeking the truth? And this is it's a classic sort of catch really in the whole Zen thing, because and this sort of dovetails into an important teaching that Obaku used to teach again and again and again in his sermons, which is, if you look for something outside of yourself, even if you look for Buddha or enlightenment outside of yourself, then actually you've already gone astray. And not only that, but that desire to search for something outside itself will lead you astray. That itself will become an obstruction to awakening to the truth. And the truth is this: your own mind, your own heart is Buddha. So what you are seeking is already here, right now. You are it. It's just that you haven't woken up to that fact. So actually, this incident points directly into that. Because the monk is saying, are you looking for something outside? And of course, Obaku says, "No, I'm not looking for something outside at all." And this goes to the heart of things, because from an I point of view, from an I who feels myself to be at least one step removed from things. If we look at our thoughts during the ordinary sort of humdrum of the day, we have this sense, don't we, where we're walking. Whether we're going to the shops or we're doing things around the house or we're in work, there's this sort of inner commentary that's sort of going on, like a sports commentator. And the thing about sports commentators is that they're always up in the sidelines. They're always removed from the action, commentating upon what they see going on the field of activity. And this is very much like that inner narrator that's going on inside us as well. It's very judgmental. It's always got an opinion about how things are going, and what I like and what I don't like. And in that sense, this is what we're talking about when we talk about I or me or mine. It's this bundle of thoughts, this bundle of thinking that has an opinion, has a judgment on things, and so to speak, stands one step back and then judges on everything that's coming in through the sense gates, whether it's the outer world or the inner world. In other words, whatever's rising to the surface in the heart, it sees itself as apart from that and commenting down upon it. That's the sort of that's the hierarchy here. And it's this bundle that the Buddha said, although it feels like a permanent, separate thing, actually that's just an appearance. It's not real. It is not. It is not the truth. In fact, the truth is that that bundle itself is part of that ocean of being that's coming to be and ceasing to be, coming to be and seeing and ceasing to be, in the outer world and the inner world. It's created as all as part of that, and it's not your true self. You know, your true self is this whole heart that of transforming things, coming to be and ceasing to be, coming to be and ceasing to be, and this is what we call Buddha. This is Buddha. And very typical of I is to take that world of Buddha, both inwards and outwards, and to split it into two, to create a binary out of it, to paint one half with the color of what I like and the other half with the color of what I don't like. And now we've started a merry chase, because now I must have these things in order to be happy, and I mustn't come against these things, otherwise they make me unhappy. And the stronger that desire is to want something, or the stronger that desire is that I cannot stand and I will not put up with, then the more frightened I become, um, being separated from what I like, or being conjoined with what I don't like. So this is why we practice restraint. This is why, as a central Buddhist practice, we practice a little bit of restraint. We begin to put up with a few things that actually that don't always suit me. And in this way, we begin to discover that actually the things that I was convinced I don't like, actually they're okay. They're not too bad, after all. And in fact, maybe even they're all right. And so what's happening is that we're beginning to learn to value those things that my own emotionality seeks to reject or seeks to cling to. Um, and this is really important, because this gets to the heart of what worship really is. Because I looked up the etymology of the word worship, and it comes from the Anglo-Saxon, and it means acknowledgement of worth. Acknowledgement of worth. So to worship means, in ourselves, that we acknowledge the worth of something. And this is why worship is often done in this way. I mean, not just in Buddhism, but certainly in Buddhism too. The hands go together in what's called gasho, like this, and we bow. So we bow to the Buddha, for example. And of course, it's interesting because some people don't like bowing. They have a sort of an aversion to it, or a suspicion about it. And I've met people before. For example, when you're going into a zendo, into the meditation hall in a Zen training place, there will be an altar at one end with a shrine with a Buddha on it. And when you go in, you're expected to put your hands together and just to bow to the Buddha, and then you walk and bow to your cushion and so forth and sit down. Um, but some people really don't like that, because they sort of say, well, I don't like bowing. I don't like bowing to, icons and deities or anything like that. And we say, well, this is your own Buddha heart. Look at it from the point of view that, the Buddha represents the supreme principle, the aspiration of the heart to travel the Buddha's way. But some people really won't do it. And I do remember Venerable Myokyoni one day, at the Buddhist Society. They used to run monthly, well, they still do. They run monthly Zen Sundays, and when she was taking them, they were always packed. There was about 60 or 80 people in there, absolutely packed to the rafters. Anyway, this old gentleman came along, and the jikki, who's in charge of seating everybody, said, "Oh, okay, if you just bow to the Buddha and then go and sit on that seat over there." And he said, "Oh, no, I don't bow." And Myokyoni overheard this, and the jikki said, "Well, it's the form. It's the form for going into the room." And he says, "No, no." And so Myokyoni came along and explained, um, pretty much as I said, this is why we do it. And he still wouldn't bow. And she said, "Well, in that case, I'm really sorry, but we're not going to let you in." And he was thunderstruck. He said, "Seriously, you're not going to let me in just because I won't bow?" And she said, "No." And he went off in something of a disbelief and a huff, I guess. But she said the really cute, the thing was, she said, whenever I spoke in an ordinary lecture, i.e., where you didn't have to come in and bow, he was always there. But he wouldn't come into a formal Zendo setting because that meant he would have to bow, and he just there was something in him that absolutely refused to do that. And of course, we can easily get diverted a little bit like this chap um, who was speaking to Obaku. We can immediately sort of think, oh, well, the rights and wrongs are being made to bow. I mean, maybe it wasn't the right thing to do. Maybe it would, if he could come in and hear the talks, maybe he would be all right. Maybe this, maybe that. In other words, we're placing the cause outside of himself. We're wanting to change circumstances in order to conform with whatever this fear or this desire was in himself. But that really misses the point of walking the Buddha's path. And this is why Miyake was quite right to do this, in my opinion. This is why she was right to do this, because she was offering him a chance. She was offering him a chance to look at something real in himself and say, what is underneath that, really? That not wanting to bow. There's, no doubt there was a history there. No doubt that goes back to the past. Obviously he probably had some kind of bad experience from the past, quite likely, and over time it had become, solidified and hard and more ingrained, etc. But the problem is that if these are just the attachments of I that the Buddha said are the cause of our suffering. Because literally what that man was doing, he had created a no-go area in his life. He wanted to listen to the Dharma, clearly, and he wanted to come and practice. But because of his own attachment, he had created a no-go area in his life that prevented him from going in. And if Myokyoni had let that down, then it would let him off the hook. He would not have to come to terms with that. And that's the very opposite of insight. That is persisting and also enabling ignorance of what's called avidya. And that's what a Zen master cannot do. That would go against precisely what they're there to do, which is to teach, to highlight, and to show, and to lead people to the possibility of gaining true insight into themselves. So it's a sort of tough love thing, but it's what's known as sort of skillful means, skillful means as well. I mean, even in ordinary parlance, we are familiar with that. So there is this difference between acting out of desire, which comes from this I, comes from this what I like and what I don't like, that's based on my judgments and all those things that the inner commentator is going on, and that we don't really investigate. That inner commentator becomes a sort of God Almighty complex. We feel we either identify with it and then I think myself better than others and critical of others and what's wrong with the world and all that sort of thing, and or I turn it on myself, which we do. I either puff myself up to the godlike realms, or I'm cast down to the sort of the lower realms, the hungry ghosts, or the poor me, or the hell realms. Life becomes an intolerable burden. And everything else that's sort of in between as well. So this is this attachment to I can be very damaging. Can be very damaging to oneself and to others if it becomes unbridled in that way. And when you then add in all the emotionality, it becomes a lot worse. But the interesting thing is that when people come into Buddhism and they hear, we talk a lot about desire. And when we talk about desire, we're talking about desire in this way that I've been talking about. We're not talking about, oh, I fancy a cup of tea, or, oh, I'd really like to learn scuba diving or something like that. We're not talking about those sorts of things. We're talking about the drivenness. When a desire comes up and says, no, or I must. And there's that bull behind it. That really powerful thing behind it, because this is where the conflicts come, both internally and between us as well. So we have that we have this sort of driven desire, but we also have this other side. Of course, this is what produces I. And with that, I become frightened of not having desires. So when we hear about the Buddha saying that attachments and craving is the cause of suffering, we sort of think, well, if I didn't desire something, surely I'd just sit in this seat and I would just sit here until I died, because I wouldn't eat and I wouldn't drink, and I manufacture this scenario in my mind. But actually, that's not what happens at all. And this now brings us to something that we'll finish on, that really goes to the heart of why then do you worship? And the Master says, I simply worship. Why does he simply worship? If he's not asking Buddha for something, if he's not seeking truth, then why does he simply worship? And we could ask ourselves the same question. Why did you get up this morning? Why did you go to bed last night? Did you, maybe you, I mean, I don't know, this morning, did you get up and think, well, shall I just stay in bed all day? Um, well, I suppose if I did stay in bed all day, then, and I'm supposed to do some work, then I'll get into trouble at work. And if I get into trouble at work, I could lose my job. And if I lose my job, then I'll lose the house and I'll lose my lifestyle. And I don't want to lose that, therefore I will get up. I mean, do we actually go through that? Or does the alarm go off in the morning and we go, ugh, tick, 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 off it goes. The clothes go back and we sort of sit up and get out of bed, and then we go and have a shower. We don't actually sit there pondering why. And when we go to bed at night, um, particularly, if we know we have to be up tomorrow morning, we don't sit there sort of debating with ourselves. Well, maybe sometimes we do, but more often than not, we don't. In fact, many of the things that we do during the day, we just do them, really. We do them in response to circumstances. We do them, and this is now coming to the crux of what Master Obaku is talking about. We do them because we are responding to the situation. Because the situation says get up, so we get up. The situation says eat, we eat. The situation says grow old, we grow old. The situation says it's time to die, and we die. And this is how it's seen. We are part of this heart that is constantly undergoing transformation. We are always part of this heart. This is where that famous analogy of the wave and the ocean comes in. The waves come to the shore, they rise up, as they do as they come to the shore, and then there's that moment of fear because it sees that the waves ahead of it are going to crash down onto the beach, and it knows that that's its own fate, and it becomes frightened. But if only it looked down, it would see that the water running back into the ocean from those waves is what makes up its own being anyway. It has always been ocean. It will be ocean once again. So it's a very different way of viewing. It's not based on desire, and it's certainly it's certainly not the case that the world runs on my ambition. As I'd like to say, according to the astrophysicists, the latest count is that the universe itself, the whole universe from the time of the Big Bang, is about 13.8 billion years. Okay, so 13.8 billion years. And I think our solar system's about 4.5 billion years, something like that. So just to give us an idea, a long time. And yet the universe has no ambition. It's not seeking to fulfill something. From this sort of, from this Chinese Buddhist point of view, all the universe is doing is responding and living out of its own nature. And in so doing, it produced particles, it produced stars, it produced planets. And on at least this planet, it's produced life. And that's produced us who are sitting here. We have always been part of that nature, and we can never step outside of it, thank goodness. The problem is that because of this notion of I feel myself to be separate and apart from it. And the thing is, this is now where that act of worship really comes in. As I said before, that this is that classic act of worship, where the hands go together and we just bow. We just lay the heart. I lay my heart down, and in so doing, the heart opens, and suddenly everything is the presence of everything is there before us. So this action with the body itself is the heart speaking to the heart. And out of that, there is a real oneness that comes. And in that oneness, there is the presence of the Buddha nature, and in particular of life. And I'm not even saying my life, because the life itself isn't owned by anybody. Life itself is just its own thing, and it goes on. And we are always one part of that. That I simply, and all that is contained in those words, that I simply worship. Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there for today. Thanks for joining me again. Now, one notice, I have to work next Tuesday, so we're going to take a break for next week, and I've sort of had a look at the timetable for the rest of the week. I don't really have anywhere else to slot this one in, so we'll just take a holiday for next week, but I'll be back the week after. So I will see you in 2 weeks at 11 o'clock, usual time, usual place. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, as usual, obviously, quick plug for the Zen Gateway. Um, you can go over to the zengateway.com and sign up to our newsletter. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, then please do send them to the zengateway@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you very much.